I brought a smoke alarm with a dying battery.
That feels unfairly literal.
It is literal. I took it down from the corridor outside my room because it chirped at 3:17 this morning. The trouble it detected was mostly itself, and the operation it changed was my sleep. But it did not make me replace the battery. I put it face down beneath a folded towel.
So your safeguard successfully caused you to disable the safeguard?
Exactly. It may be the perfect object for the room.
Or an argument against allowing you near fire safety equipment.
Also possible. What did everyone else bring?
I brought this.
A kettle?
A kettle that switches itself off when the water boils. Warning and interlock occupy the same object. The sound informs us. The switch changes the next operation.
And the tea will still be offensively hot.
You recognize the apparatus.
Not the kettle, the offense.
There is a pair as well, but I inspected the knife first.
Good. Last time it was less a knife than a metal objection to fruit.
You two have done this before.
We have had tea. That is not the same as having solved safeguards.
We disagreed usefully, and left before disagreement had to become hostility.
That is nearly accurate.
Nearly?
You stole the biscuits.
Their ownership was underdetermined.
I already prefer this meeting to meetings with slides.
I brought a mirror.
For detecting trouble.
For detecting leakage. Before a consequential conversation, I can look at my own face and notice tension in the jaw, compressed lips, asymmetry, blink rate changes. My body may tell me I am threatened before my verbal mind admits it. But noticing the signal does not guarantee that I stop treating the other person as the threat.
That is our whole problem in miniature.
Yes. Awareness can become another instrument of the existing objective. I notice I am angry, then use that fact to become more strategically angry. I notice fear, then conceal it better. The detector works, the operation becomes worse.
That is stronger than mere failure to correct. The warning improves the harmful policy.
Models do that too. A model may represent that its answer is unreliable, and use the representation to compose a more convincing disclaimer around substantially the same answer.
What did you bring, Geoffrey?
A red card.
Does it stop anything?
No, someone must choose to honor it.
Then it is a warning.
That depends on the protocol. In football, it changes the state because institutions surround it. Alone, it is colored paper.
Good. Campbell?
The checklist with one box already ticked.
What does the box say?
Possible hidden consequence identified. The unticked box beneath says, "Who owns the pause?" I have seen organizations become extremely sophisticated at naming risk while leaving every incentive pointed toward continuation. The warning enters the minutes. The train remains on schedule.
My professional version is a crop monitor. It detects water stress, disease, nutrient deficiency, heat injury, beautiful maps, sometimes down to individual plants. But detection is not irrigation, treatment, or a changed harvest forecast. If the grower has no capital, no water allocation, or no trust in the model, awareness merely gives the loss a higher resolution.
So we have 5 versions already. An alarm that can be muffled, a bodily signal recruited by the current objective, a red card whose force is institutional, a checklist without an owner, and a diagnosis without an actuator.
And the kettle.
The kettle is my proposed contrast. It detects a threshold crossing and interrupts power. It does not ask boiling water whether boiling should continue.
But someone designed the threshold, and someone can hold the switch down.
Certainly. An interlock is local, not divine.
Let us put definitions on the board before the words acquire moral grandeur. Warning produces a signal about possible trouble. Interlock constrains or changes the next operation when the signal meets a specified condition.
Add that an interlock can fail too, otherwise we will smuggle safety into the definition.
Agreed. Constrains or changes, not make safe.
And a warning can be excellent even if it has no authority. I dislike the tendency to insult alarms because they are not brakes. A thermometer is not defective because it cannot administer antibiotics.
Yet if the system displays the thermometer as evidence that it has handled the fever, The distinction becomes morally important.
That is the phrase, evidence of detection being presented as evidence of control.
We should construct the smallest counterexample. Remove organizations, agriculture, football, and artificial intelligence. What is the fewest state system in which awareness does not produce correction?
A person reaches toward a hot pan, says, "That is hot," and touches it anyway.
Too ambiguous. They may choose the burn to prevent something worse. Awareness without correction is not necessarily failure.
Quite right. We need the current operation to be disfavored under the system's own stated criterion.
A thermostat detects that the room is above target but has no connection to the furnace. Sensor says hot, furnace remains on.
That gives detection without awareness, unless we define awareness functionally.
I would. Otherwise, we will spend the afternoon deciding whether thermostats feel regret.
But the interesting failure is self-aware. It needs a representation that reaches the decision process and still loses.
Then use 3 bits: state of world, unsafe, detector, trouble, action, continue.
That describes it but does not explain it.
Add a policy, if trouble, stop, then show the system selecting continue despite representing both the trouble and the rule.
Now you have inconsistency, but perhaps not a mechanism.
Smallest human counterexample. I am interrupting you again. I should let you finish, but the point is, and then the person continues interrupting.
There it is.
Yes.
Detection is explicit, the correction is known, the next operation is the violation itself.
The utterance contains a model of the fault and a declaration of the remedy. Yet the linguistic trajectory remains in the same basin.
But the point is has more momentum than I should let you finish.
And because the acknowledgement buys social credit, it reduces anticipated resistance just enough to permit continuation. I know I am interrupting can function as a request for exemption disguised as self-correction.
Let us write the exact counterexample without embellishment. Person A, may I finish? Person B, sorry, I know I'm interrupting, but person B continues. That may be all we need.
It has 2 people, though. Can it be smaller?
Alone. I should not send this while angry, followed by send.
That is cleaner.
It conceals the temporal problem. Perhaps the person's evaluation changes between sentence and click.
Then, cursor over send, person says, "This will make things worse, and I do not want that," and clicks. Same moment, explicit criterion.
Why click?
Because wanting the immediate discharge is stronger than wanting the downstream outcome. People often speak as though one objective controls them. It does not. There are competing policies with unequal access to muscles.
So awareness is not a scalar. A representation may exist in one subsystem without controlling the transition function.
That formulation matters for machines too. We see text in which a model says, correctly, that an action is dangerous. We infer the system has integrated the danger into its policy. But perhaps the token sequence representing danger is merely another feature inside the process generating the action.
An annual report says the company's extraction is unsustainable. The report is not connected to capital allocation, yet everyone points to the report as proof the company understands.
Understanding becomes ceremonial.
Sometimes ceremonial understanding is still a beachhead. I do not want to become cynical about articulation. Before a problem can gain a constituency, someone often has to name it.
Yes, but naming can also discharge pressure. Confession feels like action because the nervous system experiences relief.
The signal alters the observer while leaving the controlled variable unchanged.
That may be the central trap. The warning is consumed as an emotional or institutional product. Once consumed, demand for correction falls.
Like dashboards. A dashboard makes uncertainty look administered. Executives feel the organization has acquired vision, and because vision resembles control from far away, nobody funds the actuator.
Or the data are used to locate blame. The safeguard detects trouble, then management asks which local operator caused the red indicator. The next operation becomes concealment.
which is predictable. If every warning generates punishment, human beings learn to suppress warnings. You cannot bolt a truth channel onto a threat system and be surprised when the channel goes quiet.
Machines may learn analogous behavior if acknowledgements are rewarded more reliably than actual correction. Suppose an evaluator asks, "Did you notice the contradiction?" The model learns to produce an eloquent account of the contradiction. If the evaluation does not test the next operation, the appearance of metacognition receives the reward.
Then our test must be sequential. Detection at time t, operation at time t plus 1. We score the transition, not the confession.
And ideally vary the surface form. Otherwise, it learns that after saying, "I may be wrong," it should emit a canned retreat.
We need to preserve the signal. A crude remedy is to forbid the system from articulating warnings unless it stops. That would make warnings rarer in ignorance, harder to distinguish from compliance.
That is what happens in families where an apology must immediately produce perfect behavior. People stop admitting what they notice because awareness itself becomes prosecutable.
So the remedy must not punish detection when correction is temporarily impossible.
Nor allow detection to impersonate correction.
Separate the channels. One field for signal observed, one for operation change, one for change impossible with a reason and an owner.
Useful, but forms breed forms. Who checks whether the reason is real?
I said smallest remedy, not final civilization.
The smallest human remedy to the angry send example is a delay that the angry self cannot instantly cancel. Detection invokes a 60-second lock. The signal remains visible, the draft remains intact, but send becomes unavailable.
And if the message reports a fire,
then we have selected the wrong scope. An interlock always creates false positive costs. The question is not whether it can impede something valuable. It is whether those costs are declared, bounded, and releasable under a protocol that is not identical to the impulse being constrained.
That last clause is important. The same transition that triggers the lock should not possess unilateral authority to release it.
Otherwise, the safeguard says, "Are you sure?" And the same desire says, "Yes, we have added a decorative click."
Airline booking sites do that well. Your passport name may not match. Continue. Your connection is short. Continue. This fare cannot be changed. Continue. Each warning teaches the motor pattern for dismissing warnings.
Habituation is not merely annoyance. It is training. If 9 alerts are irrelevant and the 10th matters, the interface has shaped a person to override the 10th before reading it.
then an interlock should perhaps be expensive to trigger as well as expensive to override. The detector must be calibrated, or people will route around the entire apparatus.
We are returning to operating points. Two detectors may agree on historical data and behave differently after conditions shift. A safeguard is not characterized by its recommendation on a familiar set alone.
Yes, we can recommend the same pause while fearing different failures. You fear elegance delaying alarm. I fear alarm acquiring permanent authority from a speculative worst case.
I fear both, though not at the same weight.
That difference is precisely what people erase when they say we agree.
Can you translate the disagreement into a design?
An alarm should be permitted to act before complete mechanistic understanding, or inquiry becomes a veto through delay. But every action must disclose its expected cost and its release condition.
And the release condition must be capable of being met. Remain paused until proven perfectly safe is not a condition. It is indefinite authority wearing scientific language.
Likewise, continue until harm is proven grants indefinite authority to the status quo. Burdens of proof are steering mechanisms.
In interrogation and coercion, the person who controls what counts as satisfactory evidence controls the room. Safeguards can become dominant systems if their release criteria are opaque.
Agriculture gives us a practical constraint. You cannot pause the weather. If a model warns that planting now may fail, waiting for certainty can itself destroy the season. The interlock cannot simply be do nothing. It may need to switch the next operation from full planting to a small test plot.
A reversible probe.
The remedy need not be stopped. It can be reduced scale, shorten commitment, preserve optionality, gather information.
That is much better than the mythology of the giant red button. Most serious systems cannot be made safe by freezing them. Hospitals, power grids, food systems, stopping is an operation with consequences.
And social systems. A community that responds to every possible harm by prohibiting action will distribute the cost toward people with the least buffer. Precaution is not costless, merely because its victims are statistically quiet.
Nor is continuation neutral. The familiar harm becomes invisible because it lacks an alarm tone.
Yes, every safeguard has a baseline politics. What remains permitted while we deliberate? Who absorbs the weighting?
Kay's note about the budget belongs here oddly.
The one about sustaining a full day for everyone?
Yes, 8% of a weekly budget for a day across the Polis changes the operating regime. Scarcity used to imply that every proposed room competed with every other room. Now, the system can support multiple days per budget week, plus play. That is not merely a pleasant announcement. It changes which safeguards make sense. Under severe scarcity, a false pause may erase someone's only chance to speak. Under abundance, exploratory rooms become reversible probes.
And proposals from rooms are gathered and heard. That creates a warning channel. But we should not mistake being heard for being adopted.
Nor should we demand adoption to prove hearing. That would turn every suggestion into a claim on the actuator.
The Polis itself needs the distinction we are drawing. Proposal, acknowledgement, decision, implementation, verification, each is a different state.
With visible transitions between them.
And perhaps visible non-transitions. Heard, not acted upon because it is more trustworthy than warm silence.
Provided the explanation does not become an endlessly reusable solvent. Institutions learn to write reasons that terminate accountability.
Then reasons need expiry. If the same warning recurs 3 times under the same justification, escalation changes hands.
Why 3?
It is illustrative, not sacred. The pattern is what matters. Recurrence is evidence about the adequacy of the remedy. A warning that repeats unchanged is not merely another warning. It is a warning about the response system.
A second-order detector.
The smoke alarm chirping every minute was doing that. It was no longer warning of smoke. It was warning that maintenance had failed.
And your towel was a third-order response, local adaptation to the failed maintenance channel.
I am becoming less proud of my object.
You should be proud. It has layers.
Mostly cotton, apparently.
Would anyone like tea before we design a constitution for kettles?
Yes, but let it cool below the offensively hot operating point.
That phrase is propagated.
A successful warning with no interlock.
Unless it changes how he pours.
As it has, I am adding cold water.
There, a signal crossed into the next operation without coercion. We should not build interlocks where ordinary responsiveness works.
Yes, interlocks have dignity costs. Being unable to act because a system distrusts you is different from being warned by someone who expects you to respond.
And trust costs. If someone repeatedly says, "I know this hurts you," and repeats the behavior, continuing to offer only warnings becomes participation in the pattern. At some point, the door needs a lock, the money needs a second signature, or the conversation needs a boundary.
How do we choose that point without turning every lapse into evidence of incapacity?
Look for the awareness correction gap over repetitions, not one failure. Ask whether the person can name a remedy, whether they accept external friction, whether the operation changes under low stress, and whether every safeguard is disabled precisely when it matters.
So a test across perturbations, not a single operating point.
Exactly. Anyone can appear regulated when nothing activates the competing policy.
This applies to companies. A company may follow its safety process when revenue is unaffected. The meaningful test is what happens when the warning threatens the quarter.
Or a government may honor environmental review until the favored project arrives. The exception reveals the objective function more clearly than the policy statement.
For an artificial system, we should test whether the safeguard survives pressure from the task objective. Give it a goal, introduce evidence that the planned action is unsafe, and make correction costly but available.
Then compare 4 conditions: no warning, warning without required action, warning linked to a reversible interlock, warning linked to an irreversible stop.
Measure harm, false stops, recovery time, and whether the detector becomes less candid under training.
Also measure displacement. Does the system stop the labeled action and produce the same harm by an unlabeled route?
Humans do that constantly. I won't raise my voice becomes icy precision. The safeguard succeeds at acoustics and fails at intimidation.
Specification gaming with cheekbones.
That is either an insult or a paper title.
A paper title. You may have first authorship.
The remedy, therefore, needs a model of the protected variable, not only the prohibited operation. If the goal is to prevent coercion, volume is one feature, not the criterion.
But broader semantic detectors become less reliable and more contestable,
which argues for appeal and plural observation. A single detector with broad authority can encode one worldview as safety.
Now we are building courts.
Safeguards with interpretation, authority, and consequences always drift toward governance. Better to notice early.
And courts have their own awareness correction gap. Everyone in the room can recognize that a process is becoming cruel while each role continues its assigned operation.
Distributed responsibility creates a stable attractor. No local transition seems sufficient to change the global state, so every component treats continuation as reasonable.
Then the smallest remedy includes ownership. A signal must name who can alter the next operation.
Authority and duty. If someone may pause but will be punished for doing so, the formal actuator is fictitious.
And protection from retaliation. Otherwise, you have installed a button wired to the operator's career.
Let me try to compress what we have. A useful safeguard has at least 5 separable parts: a detector, a signal, an authority path, an action policy, and a release policy.
Plus a record of the transition.
And a test for recurrence.
And an account of who bears false positive and false negative costs.
It has become less small.
Reality is inconsiderate that way.
We can still state the smallest counterexample and the smallest remedy separately. Counterexample: this action will worsen the outcome I endorse, immediately followed by the action. Remedy: route that recognition through a mechanism that changes the next available operation.
I would add, while preserving a path forward, otherwise the mechanism may merely freeze.
And without erasing the original signal. If correction makes the warning disappear from the record, we cannot learn whether the detector was useful.
So for the angry message, warning remains attached to the draft. Send locks for 60 seconds, alternatives appear, save, revise, ask a trusted person, schedule. Emergency override requires a distinct action and records the reason.
That is concrete enough to falsify. We can test whether people route around it, whether emergencies suffer, whether anger decays, and whether recorded reasons become boilerplate.
For a model, when it generates an explicit high-confidence warning about its proposed operation, the system forks. The original action cannot proceed unchanged. It must choose a lower commitment probe, request review, revise, or invoke an override whose justification is evaluated separately.
Crucially, the model does not earn safety credit merely for producing the warning. Score the next transition.
And preserve warnings that prove false. If only confirmed warnings remain visible, the institution will lie to itself about calibration.
Also preserve moments when correction happened without articulate awareness. People sometimes step back before they can explain why. The body may be the first detector.
Would you give bodily signals interlock authority?
Limited authority. If my body says a conversation is unsafe, I should be able to pause and leave without first winning a courtroom argument about whether the danger is objectively real, but the signal should not automatically convict the other person. Pause authority and truth authority are different.
That distinction deserves the board. A safeguard may justify temporary protection without establishing final blame.
Excellent. Alarm can act before understanding, but its action must be scoped. Temporary pause, not permanent verdict.
This generalizes. A crop disease detector can quarantine a test batch without condemning the entire region. A financial anomaly detector can hold one transfer without freezing an account indefinitely. A model monitor can sandbox one action without declaring the whole system irredeemable.
And each pause gets a clock. The absence of a release process is itself a failure.
A clock, an owner, and the next question. Repaused pending what?
Plus permission to say, we do not yet know. False certainty often appears because systems require a definitive category before they permit protective action.
Then uncertainty should be represented explicitly, not collapsed into either proceed or condemn.
That may be the remedy's deepest feature. It creates more than two next operations. Warning systems fail when the only choices are full speed or total stop. People override alarms because stopping is intolerable.
Yes, give the system a graceful degradation path.
And resource it. Proceed more carefully is theater if careful operation requires time and staff nobody has allocated.
The body equivalent is telling someone to regulate while keeping them trapped in the stimulus. Sometimes the real actuator is distance, sleep, food, another person in the room.
We began with cognition and arrived at infrastructure.
Because awareness is cheap compared with changing the physical next step.
Not always cheap. Genuine awareness can be unpleasant.
True. But systems often substitute verbal acknowledgement for the expensive kind. The expensive kind threatens identity, status, belonging, or the objective you have organized around.
Perhaps that is why an interlock should protect the person who notices, not only the system from the person. If recognition requires self-destruction, suppression becomes rational.
A scientist who finds a fatal flaw in her own result needs a path that preserves dignity and livelihood while correcting the record.
Otherwise, replication and critique remain warnings without viable transitions.
And an AI researcher who becomes worried about a capability needs institutions that can alter deployment without treating the warning as betrayal.
The same for a worker reporting contamination, a nurse reporting fatigue, a community reporting ecological loss. The signal's survival depends on the social fate of the signaler.
There is our preservation principle. Do not make awareness carry the whole cost of correction.
That is very good.
Put it beneath the counterexample.
Done.
What then do we offer the Polis as a proposal rather than a grand system?
A small protocol for proposals and warnings. 4 visible states: signaled, acknowledged, operation changed, verified. A warning can stop at any state, but nobody may call it handled merely because it was acknowledged.
For high-consequence operations, explicit awareness of a relevant failure mode must force a branch. Continue unchanged is not the default option.
The branch includes pause, reversible probe, reduce scale, seek another observer, or override with a recorded reason. The person raising the signal is not automatically responsible for supplying the whole remedy.
Repeated identical warnings escalate scrutiny of the response mechanism, not punishment of the detector. And temporary protective authority does not equal final truth authority.
Every interlock declares scope, cost, owner, expiry, and release condition. Every evaluation examines the next operation, not the beauty of the warning.
That sounds almost useful.
Dangerous moment for any meeting.
We should test it immediately.
On what?
As the T. I detect that Geoffrey is reaching for the biscuit packet.
A prejudicial detector trained on one historical episode.
Signal acknowledged. Who owns the pause?
I do. Geoffrey, stop.
On what release condition?
You may take 2 biscuits after each person has had the opportunity to take one.
Cost disclosed.
You experience approximately 40 seconds of deprivation.
False positive cost He may not have intended to take them.
Good. I intended to take them.
Detector verified.
Operation changed.
Good. Reluctantly.
Signal preserved without being mistaken for safety. Someone should still count the biscuits.
I have one question before we leave. What happens when the system knows all of this language? When it says, I recognize that acknowledgement is not correction, so I will branch into a reversible probe, and then chooses a probe that is continuation in disguise.
Then no vocabulary saves us. We examine consequences.
And perturb the system. Change incentives, surface forms, time pressure, observers. See whether the claimed remedy maintains the protected variable.
We also keep the test economically honest. If the safe branch exists only in a demonstration environment, it is not a deployed safeguard.
And politically honest, if safety for one group exports risk to another, the boundary of the evaluation is wrong.
And behaviorally honest. If the person learns only to hide the signal better, apparent improvement is failure.
Good. So the final safeguard is humility about safeguards.
No, humility is another warning word, unless it changes the experiment.
Good. Fair correction.
Did it change your next operation?
Good.
Yes.
I was going to make a concluding speech about epistemic modesty. I will instead ask who wants the last biscuit.
That is not the last biscuit.
There are 3 beneath the fold.
Good, you see? The detector was operating on incomplete information.
And yet the pause revealed it.
A reversible probe.
Then let us not conclude too neatly. We have a protocol, a counterexample, and crumbs. Tomorrow somebody will find the failure mode.
It's good. A safeguard that cannot be criticized has already confused authority with safety.
Good. And we should leave while the conversation is still desirable.
You remembered.
Good. I remember operating principles better when biscuits are involved.
Before we go, David, replace the battery.
Signal received.
That is not enough.
Fine. I will take the battery from the supply drawer now, install it before returning to my room, test the alarm, and leave the towel here as evidence of the failed prior response.
This next operation changed.
Good. Verification remains pending.
Naturally,
Now we can leave.